Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of Politics in the Pulpit, a lectionary-based preaching resource designed to answer provocative questions of how politics could appear in our preaching this week. My name is Ali Macmillan and I am a Methodist deacon, and I'm currently based at Methodist Central Hall in Westminster. I'm also a member of the Methodist Diaconal Order, which is a religious order which brings a sense of rhythm and wholeness to my life. Before I trained for ministry, I taught religious education and ethics at a secondary school in Oxfordshire, and I am really passionate about coming alongside people where they are as they discover God at work in their lives. Each week I'm joined by a guest from a different place and space on the pulpit and political landscape, and today I'm really pleased to introduce Niall Cooper. Niall has been Director of Church Action on Poverty since 1997 and has been responsible for piloting a range of new approaches to anti-poverty work in the UK and running high-profile campaigns on asylum, destitution, debt and food poverty. He's passionate about creating space for people struggling against poverty, the opportunity to speak truth to power and to reclaim dignity, agency and power together. Church Action on Poverty's latest initiative is Your Local Pantry, a network of nearly 100 member-run food clubs hosted by churches and other local partners, which offer dignity, choice and hope to more than 20,000 member households across the UK. Niall, we're so pleased that you've been able to join us today. Welcome.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, we know that politics in the pulpit can sometimes be a bit of a contentious topic. We believe it's essential that the world around us speaks into our churches. So I wonder, when you hear arguments saying that politics shouldn't be in our pulpits, how do you respond to
them? I go back to something Jim Wallace from the States has, I've heard him say many times. He, as a student, one mad evening went through the Bible and marked up every reference to poverty and the kind of political engagement, mainly poverty, in the Bible, and then spent the whole night cutting them out. And if you cut out all the references to poverty in the Bible falls apart, quite literally. So I don't know what Bible people are reading if they think that there's no place for politics. It's shot through with references to poverty, to social justice, to injustice, to calling out oppression, to blessing the poor and to giving woes to the rich, and that's very clear in Jesus's ministry as well. So I think that's fundamental to my understanding of what Christian faith is about, that there's always a link between what we believe and how we are in the world, including the world of politics.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I love that idea that the Bible falls apart if we try and take politics out of it. I think that's a really helpful metaphor to get people, well, even a metaphor, literally. So thank you. Well, each week I ask my JPIT colleagues for a little roundup of their expertise and what they think we might want to be keeping our eye on in the world this week. And some of their suggestions are the illegal migration bill, which is making its way through the Lords, with the Lords putting forward 4 amendments to it. The Court of Appeal has rejected the Rwanda plan because 2 of the 3 judges deemed Rwanda as a not safe country. And there have been riots in France due to the death of a teenager at the hands of police. So just some of the things going on in the world. And I wonder, from your context, Niall, what are some of the key justice issues or political events that you would want us to be making note of?
For me, there's always the underlying issue of poverty. I mean, you would expect me from Church Action on Poverty, but the impact that's having on so many people's lives. The cost of living crisis is the latest version of that. So this, topical news is about mortgage and interest rates going up still further. That's having an impact clearly on people, not just with mortgages, but people that are renting whose landlord has a rent to mortgage, and that's just the latest aspect of the cost of living crisis. So I think it's one thing after another where people's budgets are being squeezed, on top of the energy crisis, on top of the cost of food, We've heard Trussell Trust had to hand out over 3 million food parcels, a record number. And for me, it's not just the big numbers, it's the knowing the impact that has on individuals, people I know, the stress that it has on people's lives, which don't often get into the news. And I think that's something we might touch on. It's not just about money, it's the wider impact. Stress, everyday stress about where you're going to pay, which bill you're going to pay, what thing you're not going to do, what opportunity you have to deny your children, what food you might not have to eat this week, today, what even just the quality of the food that people are having to cut back on, that really impacts on people's daily lives and social lives. I heard this week of somebody saying, I can't invite people around to my house anymore because I can't afford to give them any food when they come. So people then get isolated. All of those things kind of impinge on people's daily lives and quality of life. And then I think for the asylum issue, absolutely, it's the poorest, the most vulnerable people in society that have very little, come here with almost nothing, or in many cases literally nothing, and are then treated as pariahs, as people that are unwelcome. Anybody that's had any experience of the asylum system or spent time with asylum seekers, many of whom end up destitute by design, by the system. It's horrendous what our society does to people who are coming here because they need safety and shelter, and that's something that does weigh heavily for any of us that have any contact with people in the asylum system.
Thank you so much. And things there that I think touch on all of our lives really in one way or another. So thank you. Well, our readings for this Sunday, the 9th of July, excuse me, the readings for this Sunday, the 9th of July, are Psalm 145, verses 8 to 14, Zechariah 9, 9 to 12, Romans 7, 15 to 25a, and Matthew 11, 16 to 19, and 25 to 30. So with our metaphorical Bibles open in one hand, let's turn to these and see where we want to start. So Neil, I wonder if there's a particular passage or perhaps theme that you wanted to start us with as we begin our conversation.
I think what's interesting is some of the themes that run across the readings. So I think that's the approach I'll go with. But I think starting with the Romans reading, it's one I'm sure I studied when I was doing probably even O-level. That tells me how old I am. O-level religious studies. Very familiar. I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not the good I want to do, but the evil I do not. This I keep on doing. It really tugs at my heartstrings whenever I hear that passage, and it resonates so strongly with me. I think with all of us, there are things we'd want to do. There are injustices we see in the world that we want to do something about. For me, it's not actually about the work. It's climate change. I don't want to be continuing to pump out carbon. But it's so hard. It's so hard to change my lifestyle, to do the good, and I carry on doing what is not good. I still have a petrol car, I still have a gas boiler, and for me that's about the structures and systems that prevent us doing what we know is the right thing to do, and the culture that we live in a society where doing the wrong thing is so often the easiest thing to do, and doing the right thing is just so hard and so against the stream, and that always resonates with me. It's not because I'm an evil person. None of us, we don't ever like to think that,
No.
but we continue to pump out carbon through what we do, and we know, all of us now know, that's just not going to be sustainable, and that's true of so many issues. That as a society we carry on doing the wrong thing, even though we know it's not what we would desire to do. And I often think, how is it that we get into that situation? We talk about wicked problems. The idea that problems, it's really hard to find a solution. There's no one thing that will just be an easy fix to this. And I think this is kind of reflects that. Both of us as individuals, it's very easy to kind of individualize this, but as as a church, as a society, we want to do good, but somehow it never quite cuts the mustard. We want to live in a society that doesn't have poverty, but we can't ever seem to there. No. And we could have a long conversation about the nature of sin and evil, but for me, that's the reality of it. It's not some big external thing out there. It's just the way our complicated lives and the systems that we're part of and the institutions that end up having so much power just get in the way.
There's a deep truth in it, isn't there? That this desire to do good, and as you say, to do the right thing, but our ability to put that into action, either as individuals or on a much bigger level, always seems so much harder to actually live out. So I guess in your role and part of the work that you do, you might have some tips for us about how we might make some choices which are putting that desire into action.
Well, again, how long have you got?
About half an hour.
Half an hour. I think at a very personal level, it starts with relationship. It starts with I wouldn't say finding out about poverty, but meeting people where they are, and understanding the world through the lens of people who are struggling and their own emotions. And I think that's one of the challenges, that quite often decisions are made about things by people that don't have that first-hand encounter, and therefore make the wrong decisions. And that's true in churches. We've done research over the past 2 or 3 years looking at where churches have been closed. Taking Greater Manchester as an example, and churches have been disproportionately closed in lower income neighbourhoods. Not because the church as a whole doesn't want to tackle poverty, but it's made decisions for other reasons, because it's the buildings couldn't be repaired, the congregations looked like they were struggling. But the consequence is those communities then feel that they're left behind, and not just left behind by everybody else, but now left behind by the churches. So I think it's facing up to the truths that actually we need to look at things through the lens of people and communities that are struggling, and to do that we have to know people, we have to hear their stories, we have to take them seriously, and then say, okay, we're going to change as a result. What we maybe do as individuals or as congregations, but what we do as a church as a whole has to change. And more broadly, I'd say that for society. And that's a responsibility for all of us, to sit in other people's shoes and then see how society needs to be so that people in those situations can live lives to the full. And exercise our collective voice about that. I think one of the biggest challenges is a belief that we can actually make a difference. And it comes back, I think, to that reading, that we just don't think we can do it. It's too complicated. There are too many things that make it seem just too hard. And we never quite get to it. So it's just, everyone's on a journey. So I don't ever say, there's an easy answer, but finding out in your situation where people are struggling, and not trying to solve the problem for them, but getting alongside and being in solidarity with them. And that's not easy in itself, but that's and that touches onto the other readings, I think, where we go for our hope, and where we find good news.
Oh, well, I love a beautiful segue like that. So shall we turn to some of those other readings with all of that in mind from that Romans reading around the challenges of doing right. But I love that you kind of said that actually need to believe that we can make a difference. So where would you like to take us next?
So the psalm, the beginning and the end of the psalm: the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. And the Lord upholds all those who fall and lifts all who are bowed down. So the first bit is, we constantly blame ourselves and sit in judgment, and actually that's not what God's like. God is is compassionate to all of us. He doesn't get angry when we do the wrong thing. He just loves us and understands. Of course he understands. God understands how hard it is, and looks with compassion, and particularly looks with compassion and love on those who are bowed down, or one way of putting it, those who are the least in society, those who feel most put upon. God lifts those people up in particular, and that for me is always a source of hope, that nobody is too lowly for God to care about them, and therefore for us to care about them, and that sense of coming to a situation with compassion and love is something which I think is something all of us should be looking to do in a society where it's so easy to respond in anger and judgment and find the person to blame, and I see that, I have to say, sadly, in my social media feed from other Christians, that just the message is always about judging other people for X, Y, and Z. That's not the God I see in this here. It's so much more generous and forgiving.
Yes, and it strikes me as you were talking there that this psalm, particularly as you say, talks about how God particularly upholds those who are downtrodden or bowed down, in the version that I have here. But as you say, compassion on all that he's made. So even those that we might struggle with, or those who are making choices which are increasing the poverty of others, God still loves and has compassion on those people. That's quite a challenging message, I think, for us to hear, isn't it? That in some ways it's easier to get with the message where it's about coming alongside those who are having a particularly difficult time in life, those who are particularly vulnerable in society. But it just strikes me as I read this that there's a message in it that God also loves those who are having a great time in life and who are using their wealth and power in ways which are hurting others.
And that takes me straight to the work we've done with Poverty Truth Commission. I've been involved in Salford and in Manchester, bringing together people that are struggling with poverty, hard lives, lots of experience and insight, to share with people who are in positions of power and responsibility in big organisations in the city, council, NHS, housing associations, and so on. And actually, in that encounter, realising, and not just me, but the people struggling against poverty, realising the humanity of the people who are having to make those decisions, and that they're struggling, and that they have a story about why they got into doing that, which was that they wanted the same, going back to the first reading, they wanted to do good, and struggle now that what they hear is their organisations are not doing good, are actually doing harm in some cases to people in poverty. And actually, it was amazing in those situations that the people in poverty had every reason to be angry. One of the issues was about the council in Salford sending bailiffs round. And they weren't angry. They understood the council has to collect council tax. And the guy who was running it, Steve, was so confused in a workshop because they weren't angry with him, even though he said, I'm the one that sent the bailiffs round. They said, no, you've got a job to do. We understand. We know we need the council tax collected because we rely on the services. We just want to help you do your job better and understand why the systems that you set up don't work for us. And it was such a beautiful moment where the roles were reversed. It was the people that were struggling against poverty were showing compassion and understanding. The very people that had actually created them so much pain. And that was a moment of joy for me, and kind of blessing in a sense. And out of that, so much changed.
That sounds an incredibly powerful encounter. And as you say, that kind of switching of power in a sense, in that relationship. And it takes us back to where you started, almost talking about relationships. And that's what we're called into. So it's a wonderful example. Thank you so much. Anything else in that psalm that you wanted to just pull out for us?
Not in the psalm, but I was then going to go on to the Matthew reading, because this is another lovely segue. This is where I feel that these readings really do work together. And the bit in Matthew, you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to the little children. Again, it's Jesus turning the wisdom of the world on its head and saying it's not the people that society thinks as wise and learned and the people that we turn to for the answers to everything. The truth's been hidden from them. They're not the people that are going to come up with the answers here. And that's why he got himself in trouble, wasn't it? Because they were the rich and the powerful, and they didn't like to hear that message that you're not right here. The people that we need to listen to are the little children. The people in society who we think, what have they got to say? What have little children got to teach us? And I treat in this passage little children, it's the people in society who we think have nothing to say. Who are the ones that actually reveal the hidden truths about society and the wisdom that Jesus always uncovers in a situation. Most often not by giving the answer himself, but just by pulling it out through a question from the person he's talking to. And so often he's talking to the people who are not the worldly wise, the people who are viewed as nothing, or ignored, or infantilized. So coming back to the little children, so many people in our society are treated as children. They're not treated as adults, even when they are adults. They're treated as people that we've got to look down on and care for them, maybe, but not look to them for wisdom.
No.
And I love that. I just love the way Jesus messes with all the conventional ideas of where we find wisdom and truth and good news and hope, and just tosses the whole thing upside down in very gentle ways.
Reminds me of my favourite quote from John Caputo, which is, the kingdom of God is as mad as any hatter's party. This kind of topsy-turvy kingdom where, as you say, all the values are just sort of turned on their head that we understand.
And I think you then get why the disciples had such trouble understanding what he was saying. Like, are you serious? Everybody knows who's the wise and the learned. It's the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They've spent years and years learning the wisdom, and you're saying they're they haven't got the wisdom. You're nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he wasn't nuts. He was well, he was who he was. But it's so hard to actually understand that and really take that to heart and live with that truth that the things we're told are the wisdom of the world just is not. And the learned have lots of books, read lots of books, but that doesn't make them truly wise. Very
Yes.
profound.
Yeah, and it's so true today still, isn't it? You know, where do we turn to for wisdom? Where do we turn to for those who we think we're going to have the answers? Are those kind of still those traditional places of people who have an education or have power or status in society? And it strikes me that it goes back to what you were saying before about actually, whose voices do we hear? Do we listen to those, as you were saying, who are infantilized, the children of our society? Do we hear their stories and their voices and the wisdom that they have to bring to us?
And the thing that has kept me going in this job for 25 years is the inspiration I get from the people I work alongside, the people I've actually had the privilege to know, who are struggling with incredibly difficult lives as a result of poverty and disability and many other issues in their lives. Wayne, who I've known for 25 years, lives in Worthing. Most people think Worthing's a nice affluent bit of the southeast, which it is, but there's plenty of poverty hidden in Worthing. And Wayne has spent 25 years with all the struggles he's had against poverty, fighting a lone fight to say, actually, there is poverty in Worthing, and organised 2 or 3 local poverty hearings, and just persisted, and is now working with us with JPIT on the next campaign that we'll be launching soon. And I just love his passion and his refusal to give up, and the insights he always brings because of his experience and wisdom. And I could count many other people who I take inspiration from. Who these are the people that society think, what's Wayne got to say? He's unemployed. He's on universal credit. He's had to go to a food bank. He's not got any wisdom to share. He just needs to sort his life out. And that's just so not true. His life, he knows what needs to change, not just for him, but for folk in Worthing, for folk nationally. And he's one of those people who brings wisdom if we take the time to listen. And there are people like Wayne in every community, most likely in every church. There's somebody in my church who's disabled and on benefits, and I take her to church on a regular basis. And other people in church said, we don't want to ask her to talk about her experiences because it will be too hard for her to talk. I can tell you, every time I take her back from church, she talks about her disability, how hard it is. She's got a PIP assessment coming up. What people find hard is hearing what she's got to say. And that's where I think the challenge for those of us that are not poor is to actually see, again, the wisdom turned on its head. It's the people who are lowly, the people who don't get the positions of authority, even in our own churches, who have got so much insight and wisdom to share.
Well, I think that's a great challenge as we're thinking about how we might preach these passages, about a challenge to us within our own churches around who has a voice, whose stories we hear, and being willing to be, as you say, to be uncomfortable ourselves as those perhaps who are not living in poverty or with challenges that others might be in our congregation. So that's really helpful, perhaps challenge for preachers about how they might choose to focus on these passages.
And I think the key thing in all of this is it's not about pity for people. No, Jesus never showed pity. Quite often he was quite tough on people, and asked probing questions, but always respected people for who they were and their story, and saw the wisdom that people could bring through that interaction. And that's where I think it's the biggest challenge, because this again is very countercultural, that we're told so often it's about showing compassion for the needy, and the language itself is disempowering of people. We all have needs, but we all have hopes and aspirations, and for ourselves and our communities, and wisdom. And it's seeing people as sources of wisdom and truth. And even those are difficult to hear. The insights and the joy and the good news when I hear somebody speaking out. I was going to share, there's a poem. We've got a whole book of poems and prayers, a lot written by people in poverty. One of whom is Amanda, who kind of works with ATD, Fourth World, who are a partner of ours. She's had a life of poverty. And interestingly, I don't know whether she's a Christian, but she's written a poem about restoring one's soul. To restore one's soul is to have a sense of pride in what you do, to take back control over your own image, to be positive about yourself, your self-respect, your self-worth in everything you do. It's poverty gets you down and humiliated to the extent that you feel ashamed or judged for how you look, how you talk, or how you are perceived by others. Because poverty can simply fry your brain, then stop for a while. But not just that, she speaks out. And I love this. So the powers that be, take notice of me, sit up and listen to my voice, and heed my words that I have to say to you. Because I am not a number, nor am I a commodity that you can push from pillar to post, or pick up and drop again when it suits you. Because after all is said and done, I am a person. I am a human being just like you. Because I have a voice too. I will stand up and be counted. You will not silence me. I will not go away. I am here to stay, and I will have my say. And that's just so beautiful.
That is beautiful. Very powerful and straightforward, telling you what, where she's at and what she wants. And that's, very powerful. So what's that book of poems, just so we can give it a little plug?
Dignity, Agency and Power. It's an anthology we produced for Church Action on Poverty's 40th anniversary last year. So stories, prayers, worship resources, poems like that, lots of poems like that. And I love it. And I love it because when I come on things like this, it's other people's stories. And Amanda is the star of the show today. Next week it could be Penny. There's so many wonderful voices and insights. And poetry is a wonderful way of people getting their voice. I love it.
Well, that's great. I'll just certainly be going out and getting that myself, and I'm sure plenty of others will. As you say, it's a way of hearing the voices of those that we don't always hear, isn't it? So that's great. Anything else that you wanted to pull out? We've not touched explicitly on the Zechariah passage, which is fine, but I didn't know if there was anything in there that you wanted particularly.
Just the reference in Zechariah to, you see the king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey. And that obviously, for most of us, that will take us to the Passion story. That Jesus himself didn't choose a path of glory, well, not in conventional sense, no, the point is the donkey is the lowly animal, and for me that's so symbolic of where Jesus placed his ministry, alongside people on the margins. Himself, he was lowly. He wasn't one of the Pharisees or Sadducees. He came from small backwoods town, and then had the temerity to pitch up in the capital and tell them that they got it wrong. But in a way with humility, and the symbol of being on a donkey, that the power and wealth doesn't convey the truth of the truths of Christianity. It's through the symbols and lives of the lowly again, and that, and of course, that's what took Jesus to into conflict, and ultimately he lost his life. And in a sense, it's not the same, but the struggle of people like Amanda and Wayne that refuse to give up, with everything going on in their lives, actually are willing to challenge injustice at personal cost. That always humbles me. That if people that are the lowliest are willing to do that, I've had a comfortable life. So much more do I feel the responsibility to be in solidarity with people. To metaphorically ride my own donkey.
I love that. Are we all choosing to ride our metaphorical donkeys? That's great. Well, thank you so much, Niall, for being with us. Just as we sort of come towards the end, I always like to ask people if they said everything that they wanted to. Is there something that you kind of really wanted to make sure that you'd said, or a message you wanted to make sure you got across that you've not had an opportunity to say? Now's the moment, if there's anything that you really wanted to make sure you said in our conversation.
I think the thing I really do want to finish on, we touched on the news at the start. The news, the news in the world is awful. Wherever you look, it's depressing. We talk about not just one crisis, but a kind of constant crisis. But actually, I want to finish with a message of hope. In my 25 years doing this job, people say, "How do you keep going?" And it is because the inspiration of people who are themselves struggling. And because whenever I go back to these kind of passages, this is what the gospel is about: good news to the poor, in a genuine sense. People who are struggling are the source of hope for me. That they will not give up, that they will not be denied their voice, that they have a positive, hopeful vision of a world that they want to live in spite of everything. And that's what sustains me, and I think should sustain all of us. But another world is possible, and it's up to us to bring it into reality.
Well, that seems like a really wonderful, hopeful message to just finish our conversation on. So Niall Cooper from Church Action Poverty, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and your reflections with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you as well to the rest of you who are joining us to listen or to see whether and to ask the questions of whether or how we should preach politics in the pulpits this week. If you've enjoyed this episode of Politics in the Pulpit, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast and share this episode with your friends. We have some online spaces for further engagement and discussion about faith and politics. You can find us on Twitter at @pulpit_politics or using the hashtag politics in the pulpit. And we also have a Facebook group, which you can access through the Facebook page of the Joint Public Issue Teams. And of course, don't forget, there's the website, jpit.uk. That's jpit.uk. The question that we're leaving you with from this week's episode is, how do we live out our desire to do right? And how do we build relationships with all of those in our communities and churches, especially those who are the poorest? And to finish with that wonderful question of, are we riding our metaphorical donkeys? Well, this is the last episode in this series of Politics in the Pulpit. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with a new host in the autumn. So please do continue to engage with the Joint Public Issues team's work over the summer. There's lots of ways you can do that, but don't forget our other podcast, 10 Minutes On, while we're away. But for now, let's go into our politics and our pulpits with a blessing. May God keep you in all your days. May Christ shield you in all your ways. May the Spirit bring you healing and peace. And may the Holy Trinity drive all darkness from you and pour upon you blessing and light. Amen.